One of the pilots operating the doomed Air India flight asked why fuel was cut off just seconds after taking off. A preliminary report has found. Initial investigation of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner's black box indicates a possibility that the pilots may have made an error while operating the flight bound for London. All but one of the 242 passengers and crew died when the flight crashed into a medical hostel just seconds after taking off, with Vivek Ramesh the only one to survive. Another 19 people were killed on the ground in the impact. A 15-page preliminary report into the crash, released by the Indian authorities last night, indicates switches to the engine's fuel supplies were moved from the run position to cut off. The engine N1 and N2 began to decrease from their takeoff values as the fuel supply to the engines was cut off, the report said. This could have triggered a loss of thrust, which resulted in the jet ploughing into a medical college. Analysis of the cockpit voice recording revealed that one of the pilots asked, "Why did you cut off?" To which the other pilot replied, "I didn't." Though the report does not identify which comments were made by the flight's captain and which were made by the first officer. Another sign that the switches were turned off was the deployment of the plane's emergency power system, a ram air turbine or RAT, which was pictured hanging down from the flight during its last moments. Fuel switches are typically flipped to the cut-off position after a flight safely touches down and reaches the airport gate, or it is done in case of a certain emergency situation, such as the event of an engine fire. But the inconclusive report, which came out 30 days after the crash, does not indicate that the flight encountered any such emergency situation. It is almost impossible to turn the switches off accidentally. They must be pulled up and locked before flipping, a safety design feature that was introduced decades ago. Protective guards are further installed to minimise the risk, raising further questions as to why the fuel switches in the Air India flight were turned off. Sources say the black box analysis has so far been unable to rule out improper, inadvertent or intentional action that caused them to be flipped. Interestingly, the report points out that the US Federal Aviation Administration in 2018 issued a special airworthiness information bulletin highlighting that a few Boeing 737 fuel control switches were installed with the locking feature disengaged, but it was not deemed unsafe. The report also found that pilots were able to restart one of the engines, but failed to stop the plane from decelerating. No significant bird activity was observed in the vicinity of the plane's flight path, the report added. The initial investigation was led by a panel including Indian authorities and experts from Boeing US and the UK. Pilot Samit Sabharwal and co-pilot Clive Kunder had more than 14,000 hours of flying experience between them, including some 9,000 hours on the 787. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner, with 242 passengers on board, including 53 Brits, smashed into a doctor's hostel in Ahmedabad in the west of India. The plane was headed to London Gatwick with 232 passengers and 10 crew on board when it crashed just seconds after takeoff. British passenger Vivek Ramesh was the sole survivor of the fatal crash. He cheated death after being flung from seat 11A on the flaming Air India jet, escaping with minor injuries, and was filmed walking away from the wreckage.